Hello everyone. In a few minutes we'll be setting off on our trip to the palace of No.10. There are a few things I should mention before we go, so please pay careful attention. Now, there are 3 groups of us on this trip, and we'll be using 3 coaches to get to and from the palace. They each have numbers on the front, and ours is coach 2. Please check that you board the right one, both at this end and when we come back. Otherwise, I'll be running around looking for you. So, coach 2. The palace is probably going to be very busy, so please stay close to me when we get there. If you lose me, head for the main gate, which is opposite the ticket office, and you'll find me there. Alternatively, call me on my mobile. The number's in your information pack. Your pack also contains a card called a freedom key. Keep hold of this, as you can use it to get money off in the cafes and restaurant at the palace. Now, these days, the palace is a museum, but you'll be surprised to hear that people still live there. No, they're not kings or queens, but local people who work at the palace and their families. Many of them wear traditional clothes, so they make a great subject for a photograph. But please ask them if it's okay before doing this. These people may also offer to sell you small wooden and stone statues that they've made. They make lovely souvenirs. They'll probably ask you for about $20 or so for these, but it's perfectly acceptable. Indeed, it's usually expected to offer them less. 30% below the asking price would be an acceptable figure, but please don't try to go lower than that. The statues, by the way, are a copy of the large statue of King Hupugata, which is just inside the main gate. A quick word of warning. This is of great significance to the locals, and while nobody will object to you photographing it, they don't like people touching it. So hands firmly in pockets when you walk past him, please. Okay, so that's the boring stuff out of the way. Does anyone have any questions about the... I'd like to briefly tell you about a few of the main attractions at the palace. You'll find these on the map in your information pack. Now, one of the first things you'll see is the statue of King Hupugata, which I just mentioned. This is on the right-hand side of Monument Court, the main square inside the palace grounds. Monument Court so called because of the many statues of kings, queens, and other historical figures there. Dating back to 123 BCE, the king's statue is 6 meters high, made of stone with a layer of gold and dotted with jewels. That's genuine gold, by the way, not just paint. Unfortunately, the jewels are made of glass. The originals were stolen many centuries ago. Just beyond the court is the Temple of the Sun. This is the oldest part of the palace and is estimated to be about 2,700 years old. It originally had a roof, but now there are just the columns that supported it. There are 130 of them altogether, each one rising between 20 and 25 meters from the ground to support a frame of iron bars on which the roof originally rested. To the left of the Temple of the Sun is the new palace, and it's here that you'll find the royal chambers. It's called the new palace because it's the newest part of the palace complex, although it was actually completed in 1346, which makes it quite old, really. Anyway, the royal chambers were where kings and queens from the middle of the 14th century had their private rooms, bedrooms, bathrooms, things like that. It was also where they would have kept all their valuables, although these have now been moved to the Palace Museum, which is also worth a visit. This was opened in March 2010. No, sorry, 2011. As well as valuables like jewellery and other historical objects, the museum also houses an impressive collection of weapons, including a sword that is said to have belonged to King Hupugata himself.
Good evening, everyone. Let me start by welcoming you all to this talk and thanking you for taking the time to consider joining ACE Voluntary Organisation. ACE offers support to people and services in the local area, and we're now looking for more volunteers to help us do this. By the way, I hope you're all comfortable. We have brought in extra seats so that no one has to stand, but it does mean that the people at the back of the room may be a bit squashed. We'll only be here for about half an hour, so hopefully that's okay. One of the first questions we're often asked is how old you need to be to volunteer. Well, you can be as young as 16, or you can be 60 or over. It all depends on what type of voluntary work you want to do. Other considerations, such as reliability, are crucial in voluntary work, and age isn't related to these, in our experience. Another question we get asked relates to training. Well, there's plenty of that, and it's all face-to-face. What's more, training doesn't end when you start working for us. It takes place before, during, and after periods of work. Often, it's run by other experienced volunteers, as managers tend to prefer to get on with other things. Now, I would ask you to consider a couple of important issues before you decide to apply for voluntary work. We don't worry about why you want to be a volunteer. People have many different reasons that range from getting work experience to just doing something they've always wanted to do. But it is critical that you have enough hours in the day for whatever role we agree is suitable for you. If being a volunteer becomes stressful, then it's best not to do it at all. You may think that your income is important, but we don't ask about that. It's up to you to decide if you can work without earning money. What we value is dedication. Some of our most loyal volunteers earn very little themselves, but still give their full energy to the work they do with us. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the work areas that we need volunteers for and the sort of things that would help you in those. You may wish simply to help us raise money. If you have the creativity to come up with an imaginative or novel way of fundraising, we'd be delighted, as standing in the local streets or shops with a collection box can be rather boring. One outdoor activity that we need volunteers for is litter collection, and for this, it's useful if you can walk for long periods, sometimes uphill. Some of our regular collectors are quite elderly, but very active and keen to protect the environment. If you enjoy working with children, we have 3 vacancies for what are called playmates. These volunteers help children learn about staying healthy through a range of out-of-school activities. You don't need to have children yourself, but it's good if you know something about nutrition and can give clear instructions. If that doesn't appeal to you, maybe you would be interested in helping out at our story club for disabled children, especially if you have done some acting. We put on 3 performances a year based on books they have read, and we're always looking for support with the theatrical side of this. The last area I'll mention today is first aid. Volunteers who join this group can end up teaching others in vulnerable groups who may be at risk of injury. Initially, though, your priority will be to take in a lot of information and not forget any important steps or details. Right, so does anyone have any questions for me about it?
Hi, Chantal. What did you think of the talk then?
Hi, Hugo. I thought it was good once I'd moved seats.
Oh, were the people beside you chatting or something?
It wasn't that. I went early so that I'd get a seat and not have to stand. But then this guy sat right in front of me and he was so tall.
It's hard to see through people's heads, isn't it?
Impossible. Anyway, to answer your question, I thought it was really interesting, especially what the speaker said about the job market.
Me too. I mean, we know we're going into a really competitive field, so it's obvious that we may struggle to get work.
That's right. And we know we can't all have that dream job.
Yeah, but it looks like there's a whole range of areas of work that we hadn't even thought of, like fashion journalism, for instance.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting so many career options.
Overall, she had quite a strong message, didn't she?
She did. She kept saying things like, I know you all think this, but... And then she'd tell us how it really is.
Perhaps she thinks students are a bit narrow-minded about the industry.
It was a bit harsh, though. We know it's a tough industry.
Yeah, and we're only first years after all. We've got a lot to learn.
Exactly. Do you think our secondary school education should have been more career-focused?
Well, we had numerous talks on careers, which was good, but none of them were very inspiring. They could have asked more people like today's speaker to talk to us.
I agree. We were told about lots of different careers, just when we needed to be, but not by the experts who really know stuff.
So, did today's talk influence your thoughts on what career you'd like to take up in the future?
Well, I promised myself that I'd go through this course and keep an open mind till the end.
But I think it's better to pick an area of the industry now and then aim to get better and better at it.
Well, I think we'll just have to differ on that issue.
One thing's for certain, though. From what she said, we'll be unpaid assistants in the industry for quite a long time. I'm prepared for that. Aren't you?
Actually, I'm not going to accept that view.
Really? But she knows it's the case, and everyone else says the same.
That doesn't mean it has to be true for me.
Okay. Well, I hope you're right.
I thought the speaker's account of her first job was fascinating.
Yeah. She admitted she was lucky to get work being a personal dresser for a musician. She didn't even apply for the job, and there she was getting paid to choose all his clothes.
It must have felt amazing. Though she said all she was looking for back then was experience, not financial reward.
And then he was so mean, telling her she was more interested in her own appearance than his.
But she did realise he was right about that, which really made me think. I'm always considering my own clothes, but now I can see you should be focusing on your client.
She obviously regretted losing the job.
Well, as she said, she should have hidden her negative feelings about him, but she didn't.
It was really brave the way she picked herself up and took that job in retail. Fancy working in a shop after that?
Yeah, well, she recommended we all do it at some point. I guess, as a designer, you'd get to find out some useful information, like how big or small the average shopper is.
I think that's an issue for manufacturers, not designers. However, it would be useful to know if there's a gap in the market, you know? An item that no one's stocking, but that consumers are looking for.
Yeah, people don't give up searching. They also take things back to the store if they aren't right.
Yeah. Imagine you worked in an expensive shop and you found out the garments sold there were being returned because they fell apart in the wash.
Yeah, it would be good to know that kind of thing.
Yeah.